moving on to our next perspective from Elke Lubel. Germany is strongly supporting MHPSS with an increasingly large portfolio since 2014. Having heard these relevant examples from the field, what are the key principles for working on MHPSS on the local level in displacement and crisis settings from your perspective?
First of all, please tell me when to wrap up. I have no problem because I could speak hours about MHPSS. I'm very sorry. Second, the most important key element is to have people like Hashim and Ruma, people on the ground working. If you are there, if you talk to the people, you know we have to do something. So before I start with some other points, this is very important to have these people who really engage in the field of mental health and psychosocial care. Then perhaps Mariette started already with capacity and tools, and I stated in my first intervention, it's a long-term and multi-sectoral issue, so don't expect to have results and evidence in 1 year. You need a long distance run. In German Development Cooperation, we have a special initiative, Displaced Persons and Host Communities, and we already work there since 2014. So I think to have a tool where you especially say, in this tool, I can work with mental health on a long-term run. I can work with children. We cooperate with UNICEF a lot, so we can scale up our interventions is key for our work. Then I would like now to focus on 2 key principles which are very important to us after experience we have. For example, I have been to Iraq various times, and we worked a lot in Iraq on mental health issues with the question of the victims of the Daesh, of IS, and this is something for the new generation, for the children that have been born at that time. We have to stay there, and we do a lot of work there. We work also with the Rohingya in Bangladesh. The 2 points I wanted to focus on is first, that if we work with mental health and psychosocial care, we specifically have to take into consideration vulnerable groups. You work with disabled, with people with disabilities. We have to work with women in a specific way, with young girls and young boys, and we have to have gender transformative approaches. So we really have to do now the deeper dive. As I said, since 2019 we got some steps forward, but now we have to be much more explicitly on certain issues we work on. In Germany we have a strategy on feminist development policy, and so the psychosocial well-being from our point of view is essential to be a member of a society that can participate economically, that can receive education and so on. So it's the base we are working on. It's not a nice to have, it's a base for all development we want to see. So we want to work with people of all genders and sexual orientations, children, elderly people, people with disabilities, ethnic and religious minorities, because often the separation from the mainstream society is one of the big problems we find, and we have to find solutions for that. I just wanted to talk about Iraq, for example. We worked with the Yazidi women for years, which now can reintegrate into their society, but they need help. For example, we support safe houses in Iraq for women, and I see the clock. Okay. Second point, to learn from bottom up. We have to learn from the community. So if we want, for example, work more on agenda and transformation, we have to make the communities themselves act. And there we need the NGOs, we need all the partners. Nobody can do it alone. So partner on community level, try to understand what the community needs. And here my colleagues gave me one example from the War Child NGO, where we started, for example, to work with the children, but at the end, the community asked us to work with the family, to integrate the parents into all measures we were planning. So the community gave us the way forward. So this is the second point I would like to make. So, as I cannot speak about all what MHPSS means for us in the Nexus, I just want to say thank you to all of you who are engaged in this, and I want to point out that at the end of year we will have the Global Refugee Forum, and it's so important to bring our issue mental health into the Refugee Forum. Please help us all, NGOs, UN and so on, and to make it relevant in all discussions we will have there as a base for more participation, more localization, and yes, thank you very much for joining us in the club.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, while we have been talking, Sophie has been busy recording the key points of today. I think we're all curious to see what you have been doing. So, I'll let you show and tell. The stage is yours, Sophie.
All right. So in the first part of the session, we were talking about a global perspective. So that's the part that you're gonna see on the left side. In the second part, we were talking about the local perspective, and I was trying to listen, as I said, to the most important points. I know it's really hard. It's a little bit hard with the projection to see it. I hope I'm looking at the organizers that maybe they could send it afterwards, hopefully, because it looks even better when you see it on the actual screen. All right, please enjoy.
All right. Really beautiful. Thank you. I'll invite our panelists. All right. So now, time to summarize. I would like to invite Carmen Valle Travadeo to the stage. If you can join us. Sorry if that was mispronouncing.
That was perfectly pronounced. I'm so amazed.
Thank you, though. So, Carmen, you are the co-chair of the ISK reference group on MHPSS. Can you please share your most important insight of today's session and call for action to colleagues in the room?
That's what happens when you listen to one session and you have a creative mind. This is what happens when you listen to the session and you have my mind. So I'm going to try very much to summarize. And I'm first of all so happy to listen to when you speak about the things that one works with every day and you hear yes, yes, yes. So I really hope the outcomes of this session can be shared broadly, and maybe you can bring it with yourselves to the rest of these 2 days, because I think the entire humanitarian sector needs to be so much focused on MHPSS. And the reason why, it was been just expressed by you, Rosie, at the beginning. That's it. That's the perfect introduction of why this session is important. Now, I'm just going to very quickly remind us, we were talking about 2019 as the starting point. I will go a little bit back in time. In 2005, those of us wise enough to remember, there was a humanitarian reform. We realized at that time that we were not doing well, that we were not ready to address huge, big humanitarian emergencies, such as the earthquake in 2004 in Indonesia. So at that point, we need to start again and think how we do this. And right at that point, those who were working already on mental health and psychosocial support come together and they start thinking, we don't have a unified way, we don't have principles, we don't have do's and don'ts. And that's when the IASC guidelines come to be in place. those of you who don't know them, the IAS guidelines on MHPSS response. And they set up a rhythm, and it's since then that I would say we've been pressuring, we've been advocating, we've been raising our voices to bring mental health to the front. And I would agree, people would, many years ago, I've heard many times, mental health? This is an Ebola response. What is it has to do nothing with mental health, or this is an earthquake, or this is... Luckily, now we are on the same page. At least we all know in our own skin, mostly because of COVID, how it feels to go through an emergency, and we have this awareness. But there's a long way to go. So in this session, some key elements, I think, have been highlighted on how we continue forward. Now we have the awareness, great. Now what else? One point was made on the search capacity, and I would like to bring it back. There is something at the country level that we call the technical working groups, the groups that coordinate mental health and psychosocial support. Imagine we had 20 of these groups before COVID. In 2019, we have 60 at the moment. There are many of them, there's more acknowledgement, but there is a lot of resources, there is a lot of need. So we have 1 minute? No, we have one question. We need more people on the ground, and we don't have the capacity. Some years ago, my co-chair, Fahmi, and myself would go everywhere. Now we have the capacity to deploy people, and this is fantastic. And I will make the same as the Marianne made. Donors who might be interested in supporting MHPSS, this is an amazing way of doing it, being able to deploy rapidly colleagues that need to be deployed in emergencies. And then we talked about tools, the minimum service package, the tools that the interagency continues to put up, those tools that we are encouraging to share because we need to go back to quality. And the reason why I say this is because when things get attention and suddenly we are finally talking about MHPSS, and we are in a very tricky moment where we can lose quality. We are at risk of becoming a ticking box in projects. Now it's fancy to put MHPSS, so we'll put some MHPSS in there, we'll do some activities. We have to keep the quality, the amazing quality we've been having for years. So I will go back to that point that many of our colleagues have shared on tools and guidelines and the right knowledge and evidence-based practices. We also heard amazing colleagues from, so I'm going to summarize several of the sessions. Joy's comments, Grow a Strong Foundation comments, the Alliance, the Iraqi Alliance comments. Nothing that we do at the global level serves if we don't have strong partners on the ground. Nothing. We can create the most beautiful guidelines, the most incredible tools, but it's our organizations working at country level that are implementing. So it goes back to localization. And I would agree very much in terms of when we talk about localization agenda, when we talk about the triple nexus, this is all very important for all sectors. It is more important for MHPSS because of the question that you were raising. Because in MHPSS, we're talking about very scarce situations to start with. We don't have mental health services of quality in most of the countries around the world. So we need it. We need to keep on working on development, and we need to bring that local expertise onto the ground. And then I will link that with another point, another summary point, which is that cultural adaptation. It's not just working through local organizations, it's doing by the communities based on their capacity and their knowledge about MHPs. Because we all have ways, traditional ways of coping. We can't just ignore them and come with our programs globally and impose them on communities. So how do we learn from each other is another point that resonated for me. And I'm going to finish with the multisectoralism. So the final point, and then I'll move into inclusion. The final point is on that precise nature of MHPSS. I'm going to go back to the word for a minute. Why do we say MHPSS? Why don't we talk about mental health? Because it's not health services alone. Mental health and psychosocial support is a continuum that cannot be separated. We need to do services at the specialized level. We need psychiatrists and psychologists and social workers. We need the community. And we need the basic principles and safety and security and so on. So we need to pay attention to all of that. And for that, we need to continue working in integration with our colleagues in gender-based violence, in child protection, in education, in all of the other sectors. look out for the materials that we have already with many of these sectors, because we have more and more guidelines on how to work together. And I can share with a colleague on gender-based violence and MHPSS. Finally, yes, absolutely. Finally, see mental health and psychosocial support as a broader issue. We were talking about the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. Very few humanitarian organizations remember that mental health is also a type of disability, and that is protected by the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So go back to the beginning and Marianne's comments, it is a human rights issue, including the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. So I think our colleagues have shared everything that could be shared about MHPSS, and I think you've done an amazing work. So yeah, let's continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, our session has come to its end. I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to moderate this humanitarian talk. Thank you, our dear panelists, for sharing these perspectives. Thank you, Sophie and Carmen, for summarizing the outcome of our session in such a beautiful way. And last but not least, I want to thank our fantastic audience, both in room and online. Thank you for being such a curious and good listeners. I hope you leave the room today inspired by new insights and perspectives on how we can develop MHPSS and integrate it across sectors. Thank you.